All right, everyone, welcome to the Data Cloud Bootcamp. Nice to see some of you here again. So this is session number 10 or day 10 to do with activations. I had come earlier when I think it was the second session to kind of talk about overview and some life cycle and use cases. So hopefully your learning journey has been good so far. And I've seen some of the other sessions from Matt and Vlad and Chris and others. And so far, like they all have been excellent. And then if you haven't heard, I mean, just Data Cloud is one of our fastest growing products at Salesforce. So it's very good, uh, of you to kind of make this investment to upskill yourself. Um, all right, so let's get going. So today we are talking about activations, but before I kick it off, again, I'll just do a quick intro. So I'm part of Salesforce. I am in the partner product success team, and we basically help enable our broader ecosystem on all things Salesforce. And with my focus for the last 3 years has been Data Cloud. So helping our partners and our broader ecosystem to drive successful implementation and adoption of Data Cloud. Um, and you look me up on LinkedIn or in our Trailblazer community. Happy to link up there. Next, I'm sure you have seen this in every Salesforce slide. Just make all your investment, implementation, usage decisions based on capabilities that we have GA today. All right, so let's talk about the activations. But before we sort of dig into activation, right? So Data Cloud really sort of powers activation across the entire customer relationship, right? And it's just not about activation, it's also Data Cloud powers both AI as well as your activation strategy, So, and then one thing you hear is like, how do you make, especially from a marketing lens viewpoint, like how do you make every movement count across your entire customer journey, right? It comes down to three things. Like we think it's your data strategy. So how do you connect, harmonize, and unify your data? Your AI strategy in terms of how do you analyze, how do you predict, how do you use insights, and then third is equally important is what is your activation strategy, right? So how do you enrich and activate your data to personalize really every touch point? And one of the things that it's even though it's about activation, there are different ways to get value from your data, right? And activation takes different shapes and formats. So hopefully you have seen this slide before in terms of how data cloud works, so I won't dive into this. So, but today we'll be talking about the last most pillar, which is about the activate, right? And and the activate can be, uh, calculated insights using some of your segmentation strategy, being able to, use the data, even doing things like analytics, even stuff like segment generation, to using some of the newer ML capabilities like Einstein Studio and our Copilot studio that we have. So one thing I always sort of ground people in, right? Even though the term is activation, the activated data, there are different ways to get value from your data, right? It can be on the leftmost side here. It can be about analytics and insights. So being able to use stuff like calculated insights, using being able to apply analytics in tools like Tableau and Marketing Cloud Intelligence in CRM analytics. Um, Second is, is how do I really act on my data, right? So that can be from things like segmentation, activation, being able to use data actions, also stuff like data cloud, triggered flow, and with some of the newer capabilities which we have launched last year with CRM enrichment, so things like copy fields and having your data cloud related list directly within your CRM, right? So there are different ways to act on your data. And other ways is, with the whole ML, machine learning and AI, like how do I deliver predictions? They can be through the AI models like BYOM, which is build your own model. So you can use tools like Amazon SageMaker, Google Vertex to run, or it can also be very prescriptive models using Einstein Studio. And last but not the least, one way it gets overlooked, even being able to consume that data cloud data, through the API, through Lightning Web components is also a way in terms of how do you activate or act on your data. So a very common scenario is where you're enriching this you're in within your CRM instance, the contact record or the lead record or any other object with data from data cloud, right? So if a service agent is using the service console to be able to show them the unified cases, to be able to show them their insights. So without the data having to be stored in CRM using stuff like Lightning Web components. So that's also a very common pattern. So basically, net takeaway is there are different ways to get value from your data, and segmentation and activation is one of them. Now, you'll find a lot of the use cases have to do with segmentation and activation. That's because Data Cloud got its start in the marketing world as a custom data platform. So that's where you will see a lot of use cases. But I just want you to kind of keep in mind that there are lots of different ways to kind of get value from your data, I hear our clients. So today itself, we'll be sort of talking about segmentation or more on the activation. Like I know the session on Tuesday kind of did a deep dive on segmentation. So today we will focus a bit more on the activation side. But before we do that, let's do a quick recap of what segmentation is because activation and segmentation are very tightly coupled together. So what is segmentation? So segmentation is at a sense very simple, right? It's a process of selecting profiles or records that share some sort of a common criteria. So it's a very exciting way in terms of how do you make use of your data, right? So through clicks, no code, being able to create a segment of it could be my high value members who are spending more than X number of dollars, who have made 10 transactions, that can be a segment. So it's like the process of finding like-minded groups of people on which you can act on. So, um, so really the data that we bring into data cloud really, and as we are enriching those profiles, so we can use the data to organize them into group, right? So the fact is all the things that you have learned over the last, month or so, right? Being able to ingest your data, harmonize your data, unify your data, being able to create calculated insights on your data, right? Now you have all this. Now, what do you do with it, right? So basically, and that's what gives you the power to be able to sort of do segmentation and then to be able to activate them. So everyone uses segments, right? So everyone needs to do with the data or needs to action or get value from the data in different ways or in some ways. Now, the most common use cases of like a marketer or, they will have an interest in terms of being able to leverage all this rich customer data to kind of fuel more personalized experiences, drive campaigns, drive customer journeys, but also your sales team may look at segmentation to help them focus their efforts better to identify the ideal prospects by the propensity or life cycle stage. Your service teams or your service agents, right? They often look at segments to kind of find ways in terms of how do I optimize my impact? How do I reduce attrition? How do I increase overall customer satisfaction? And even your analytics or your analysts, right? They are interested in understanding broader themes and trends to identify the different opportunity. So net, everyone is using, because I think traditionally when you think of segmentation, you think of marketers. But I guess the point is, yes, it's a very common use case for marketers, but it goes beyond marketing as well. So there are different groups in terms of how you might use those different segments. Um, so really at a high level, what segmentation does, and you may have heard some of this, right? Is basically, especially as you are unified data, it's basically finding records or finding that unified individual who meets the criteria that you have specified in your segment. So in this case, if I'm saying, okay, these two records were unified and give me all individuals whose preferred color is orange, right? So individual one and individual two were unified into one unified individual record, and it will find that unified individual ID because the way Data Cloud works is as a system of reference. It can go and look at all the different individual records itself to find the right criteria. So what segmentation basically does is give me the unified individual ID or the unified individual based on the criteria that you have specified. So in a nutshell, that's what segmentation does. Now that you have a segment, what do you do with it, right? And that's where activation comes in. So segmentation and activation are tightly coupled, but at the same time, they are different as well. So let's now talk about activation, right? So what are some of the common activation, call it scenarios or use cases or just those different, need be. So with activation itself, I'm just trying to, yeah. So basically, you can supercharge your marketing cloud engagement, with being able to create precise segments to kind of activate them across your customer journey, improve your cross-channel or email performance, and also be able to power mobile messaging as well, right? So that's a common use case. You can also do like advertising activation now with Data Cloud, with our open ecosystem. We also have a lot of ad tech partner. So Data Cloud itself has natively built, activation targets to Google, Meta, or Facebook, as well as Amazon, right? So it's like, how do you unlock your unified first-party data, sort of beyond Salesforce? And then, using the App Exchange uh, framework, we have lots of other App Exchange partners who have built their own activation sort of packages, so you can just plug them into Data Cloud and activate them across those ad ad networks. And then other is any of the native, like you can activate it to any of the hyperscalers like Amazon S3 to Google Cloud Storage, Microsoft Azure, and we also launched recently even an FTP activation target as well. And then, I mean, the whole point is that you have your segment, you have, activated. Now you can also activate them to Marketing Cloud, personalization to do real-time personalization across your website and automate your real-time journeys as well. So, so in a nut, what is the activation is basically, is the process of delivering a payload of your segment members and their supporting attributes to a connected activation target, right? Uh, it sounds pretty simple, but there's a lot more details to understand about activation. So let's unpack it, right? In terms of how does it really work? So basically, how does a segment reach an activation, target? So basically, you have your segment, and you can specify which activation target you want to associate that segment with. One segment can be associated to multiple activation targets, and then you can specify any personalization attribute that you want to add in that. And then when you activate that, that's how it reaches your, activation target. Um, Now, you might be asking, unlike some of the tools like within Data Cloud, like segmentation and activation are actually separate steps, right? So why is that? Like segmentation, what I really like about activation is that it allows Data Cloud to be a powerful tool to kind of orchestrate these campaigns across multiple platforms, right? So each platform needs different data. So your activation can send your email platform, just your email addresses. It can send your ad network, like your device IDs, others. So by having that separate, so activation was built, like this framework was built with marketers in mind, but it can be used for so much more. Um, and so here's what. So this is what an activation looks like. So when you have an activation, you basically specify a segment, an activation target, as well as what the attributes that you want to add to it. And then when you hit publish, that's the process that Data Cloud will send that payload to your activation target. Now let's look at what does activation target mean and what do we have. So within Data Cloud, here just a sampling of where segments data can be sent during the activation. So we have our cloud file storage, which is S3, as well as now Google Cloud Storage and these others. You can activate it to Marketing Cloud. You can activate it to also different business units within Marketing Cloud. All that is specified within, within as you create that activation target. And then when you activate, just for your reference, within Marketing Cloud, it basically creates a shared data extension. You can also it activated back into Data Cloud into what's called as a curated DMO. So it's a special type of DMO called as a curated data model object, and a very common use is like you might be having a loyalty system, and you need to plug into Data Cloud to be like, just give me members who are in that segment. So you might publish it back into Data Cloud, and then your third-party system, in this case, Loyalty, will just consume that information. You can also activate it to any of your external activation platforms, in this case, Google Ads, Meta, other things we have within App Exchange. We also have a activation target for Commerce Cloud, in this case, B2C commerce, as well as MCP, Marketing Cloud personalization. Here's just a sampling of it, and we have, more as well. And then also FTP. So here's a screenshot, right? So again, here are some of our App Exchange partners like the Trade Desk, LiveRam, Criteo, right? In terms of what are those other, and using the Data Cloud open ecosystem framework we have, anybody can build your own, uh, activation target as well. Um, Here, I'm just gonna kind of share with you some of the activation targets, and I know the interest is also how do you study for it and get certified. So I'm gonna sort of give you some tips here, sprinkle in terms of how do you focus your learning. So pay special attention to them. So in this case, when you are activating a segment back into Marketing Cloud, it basically creates a shared data extension. You can activate one-to-one attributes. We also have this concept of BU aware activation. And now you can also include something like related attributes. And that is a typo. It is no longer in beta. That is GA. Um, I would say from a study tip perspective, like understand and know where can you find the segment that's been activated for a marketing cloud engagement activation. So focus on that. Um, Other is you can also activate it to journey builder, right? So when you create a data extension, that can be an entry source to kind of put them to a customer journey. Um, Again, here is where you can activate your segments into marketing cloud personalization. In this case, it creates basically within MC personalization for those who have used it. It basically creates a user segment, um, which can then be used for your MCP campaigns as well. Uh, Other is you can activate your segments into B2C commerce or commerce cloud. Here, when you activation, it creates it in within the commerce customer groups. There are a couple of activation targets where as soon as you install the connector, it gets automatically created. So in this case, you don't have to go in and actually create it. So again, that's a that's a study tip as well. So knowing which activation targets um, automatically are created when you install the connector. Commerce Cloud is one of them. Um, Others is a very common that we've had since day one is activation of segments into my cloud file storage and my S3 bucket, right? Um, it it again activates with S3. It actually you can activate both one-to-one attributes as well as your related attributes, and it actually creates both the CSV file of your segment members, and just for S3, it also creates another JSON file as well that has that has the metadata of the segment definition, so again, like I would say your JSON contains the metadata of the segment. I would say a study tip is understand like what is the output created for when you activate a segment into an S3 activation target. And then you can also activate it to Marketing Cloud Ad Studio as well, like if you want. So, if you're already using Ad Studio, again, in this, it's the same framework. It basically creates a shared data extension, which can then be used, for your Ad Studio. All right. All right. So, what does the activation process look like? So, what does the actual click path look like? So, the basic steps of building an activation are really simple, right? But before you do that, before you create an activation, you have to set up an activation target, right? So whether it's Marketing Cloud, S3, Google Cloud Storage, it can be an FTP. With some systems, you actually have to go and first specify an activation target. With some, it is automatically created for you. Once you have your activation target defined, then you can start by selecting a segment that you build, and then you can start to specify what attributes like first name or last name, what related attributes like my recent purchases, my case history, as well as what contact points you want to include. And by contact points, I mean it says by contact points, I mean it is like email address, your SMS address. There is some more details there that we will get into because it is kind of different in terms of how that works. But once you have all this information configured, the last step is to basically set up a publish schedule for it, right? Which will basically dictate how often you want to refresh your data within your activation target. With the contact points itself, within when you are activating to some activation target, there are a few things that you need to have. So with when you're activating to marketing cloud, you must choose one of the following, right? Either email address, phone number, or even mobile app. So it won't let you activate unless you include them. With Cloud File Storage S3 example, you can either pick email or phone number, but it's not required. So you can actually activate without having to use or specify a contact point. Same thing with personalization as well. You can use email address and or phone number, but again, it's not required. And then with external activation target, based on how that's defined, it can be a device ID, a mobile advisor ID, it can be your email address, phone number, and that's going to be based on that activation target itself. And then a concept that we will get into, that we will cover shortly, is the concept of source priority. So when you're activating a contact point, what comes into play is the concept of source priority, especially when there are multiple email addresses or multiple values exist for that contact point. Um, so additional attributes. So you can basically you can add up to, I think it's still 100. It is documented. I don't. You can add up to 100 attributes in your activation. So think of this of things like first name and last name, as well as any calculated insights as well. And you're not limited, right? So if you want to, within Data Cloud, as you're about to activate, you can modify the attribute name that is being sent over in the payload. And you do that by changing the preferred attribute name. So for example, in Data Cloud, if the field is called first name, but you need in your activation target it to be called first underscore name or F name, you can do that by changing the preferred attribute name. Again, a study tip here is understand how you can uh, modify the attribute's name during the activation. You can also, hopefully you guys had covered insights, I think sometime last week. So apart from using insights for just driving insights, you can also use insights as attributes in your activation, right? So any of your metrics, that so things like lifetime value, RFM score, they can be part of your payload in the activation, and then they can be used for the content personalization or for journey decisioning. And you can also use a dimension filter within your calculated insights to get more granular in terms of what values you want to activate. There are some nuances there about it's aggregatable versus non-aggregatable metrics. So I think as you are, review help documentation as well, like you'll get more insights there. I would say a study tip here is understand what portions of a calculated insight can be activated. It's spelled out here, so you can only activate a CI metric. So by metric, I mean stuff like lifetime value or any calculation that you do. Any of the dimensions itself, so like first name or last name, cannot be from a calculated insight, cannot be added to a activation. So just pay attention to that. We already covered this about additional attributes. I'm going to skip that. And then what we launched last year. So for the first year, Data Cloud could only activate one-to-one attributes, so things that are directly live on the profile, record. Now you can also activate related attributes. So let's talk about related. So related attributes are, think of your sales orders, your cases. It's basically whichever has a one-to-one relationship. So related attributes are a great way to kind of add additional data points that you can use within your messaging, right? So now, for example, within your email campaigns, you want to show them the top five orders or the last five orders within. Now, with using related attributes, they can all be in the data cloud payload, which you can then use within your activation target, in this case, marketing cloud engagement, and then pass through it to act on it. Um, there are a couple of considerations. Again, this I'm just laying this out there so you are aware. I don't think we go into this level of depth from an exam perspective, but just something like for you to know, right? So you can only select attributes from one path and only from a child DMO. And if there are multiple paths, basically, so we let you go down up to four different levels. So in this case, if you start at the individual level, you can go down to the insurance policy, the policy asset, the coverage, and the coverage detail. But we don't let you go across hops. So you can't go from, again, these are like, especially as if you're in an implementation or you're using data cloud, these are things you uh, need to keep in mind. Um, right now, related attribute activation. It can only be used for activations to Marketing Cloud and S3. So right now you can only add related attributes when you're activating to those activation targets. There are some limits or guardrails in terms of how it works. So you can only have up to 30 activations with related attributes. Your segment should contain less than 10 million records. And I think we kind of talk, you can traverse up to 4 hops. Um, you can also filter on your related attribute. This is actually different than your segmentation filter. And now the way the related attribute itself is in your payload is as a JSON blob. So within Marketing Cloud, you can use server-side JavaScript, guide template language, or AMP script to be able to parse that for message personalization. And in fact, if I remember right, we even introduced a new AMP script function to help support this use case. Um, all right. Now, we have talked a lot about segmentation and activation. I would say this like so segmentation and activation within Data Cloud are actually different processes, right? Oftentimes they are coupled together, and yes, they do work very close, but they are very different processes. So even though they look the same, they just seems, but so let's kind of say what is that difference, right? So segmentation itself, it basically looks at all possible records under the unified individual, if that's what you're segmenting on, to find who meets that audience criteria. Activation is a process that takes that record and then adds any attributes to deliver to your activation target. So why is that important, right? So if I look at give me all individuals whose preferred color is blue, it'll basically say unified individual, in this case, 98 dB, that value we have there qualifies. So all segmentation knows is that unified individual qualified to be in that segment. Now, when I go and activate and I'm adding any attributes, is based on how my data was reconciled, based on my identity resolution rule set, or how do I pick my source priority for my contact points? Those are the additional payloads. So the fact is, all segmentation does it basically is brings back, a group of records, or in this case, just the unified individual ID, that has qualified to the criteria that you have specified. Um, so what does Data Cloud, activate for unified individual, right? So this is just a very simple example with one source individual and one email record. And again, these are some, DMO objects that when you run identity resolution rules that you'll see. But when we activate it to Marketing Cloud, right, your activated payload, net, like it's going to be a combination of uh, both attributes from your unified record as well as your non-unified record. So I think if it, it, anything that you need to remember, right, is the fact that segmentation and activation are very separate processes, and any of the attributes that you pick, especially the direct attributes, are those attributes that have been created as part of your identity resolution reconciliation process, and then when you actually go and pick, now I'll be like, I want to pick my contact point now, in this case, email. So you don't get to pick multiple contact points in an activation. You have to pick one per channel. So now, Data Cloud as a unifies records, you can have multiple contact points per individual. Um, you can even have, so an individual could have 5 different email addresses. So how does Data Cloud pick in terms of how do I, like, what contact point? So here's right. So the what Data Cloud gives you is the concept of like source priority order. What that means is that if you have a contact points that comes from a specific source, we can prioritize that over others. So in this screenshot here, I've said CRM is my system of source, my system of truth. So I've chosen to prioritize my CRM org first, and then my e-commerce data, and then Marketing Cloud. If you have if you have more than one contact point for a given source, right? So how do you? So in this case, basically, Data Cloud, when it goes into activate, will basically look first for my email addresses coming from my Salesforce CRM, any contact point. Second would be from my e-commerce system, and third would be from Marketing Cloud. Now, if Marketing Cloud itself, say that you have, if of all you select is, like you tell us that I want my source priority to be only come from Marketing Cloud. And what if you have multiple email addresses that are mapped from Marketing Cloud? Say that you have, you know, 3 different data extensions with different email addresses, like a home email, a work email, and they all have been unified into a one unified record. Well, Data Cloud itself for Marketing Cloud, just for Marketing Cloud, it basically uses the Einstein engagement score. So in this case, it's the primary email address, with the highest click value. So that is what Data Cloud will use for your Marketing Cloud engagement activation, if that's the topmost priority. So what are the key takeaways here, right? So um, reconciliation in Data Cloud does not mean that we have created a gold record, golden record, right? Hopefully, you have heard this talk track before. What Data Cloud is, it uses the concept of a key ring, so that it's a system of reference and you have access to all of your source system records. The reconciliation rules that you specify just a way to tell what data points live on my unified profile record, and that's what gets activation. So activation itself, it uses a combination of both your individuals, your non-unified, as well as my reconciled unified attributes. Um, Paying, especially attention to activation to Marketing Cloud. That's why we say, like, always do that last mile check in your activation um, target, especially when you look at things like consent management, to just making sure that it's the right email address was included, like, for that campaign. Just because Data Cloud gives you a lot of different granular options in terms of how you can orchestrate. But if there's an absolute need that you need to make sure that I want to send to this specific email address right now, the recommendation is to do some, post processing filtering, in this case in engagement, to just make sure. There are some new capabilities coming within Data Cloud, whereby within your activation itself, you can have a contact point filter, so you can specify exactly which email to use. But that's a newer capability that's coming, But right now, like for the traditionally, like in the past, the recommendation that we have given is to always do that last mile check within your activation target, especially for Marketing Cloud. Um, all right. So that, I mean, even though activation is pretty straightforward, there are some, considerations there. I know I'm going to just quickly touch upon data actions. Like, I think we have a call next week, I think, where there's going to be a deep dive on this. So I won't steal the trend, that thunder. So basically, what is data action, right? So data action is another way to get value from your data, right? So basically, you can respond to customer actions in, on events, either real time or near real time. And there's a couple of different patterns, right? So for any of your streaming data that comes in, so right now through the mobile SDK, the Web SDK, you can create something called streaming insights. The other thing is also for any of your data model object, any change data capture, so any DMO change event. So if you change your last name, or the loyalty status changes, or your VIP status changes, or any other calculated insight changes, they can be, you can basically configure a data action to a data action target. Right now, it can be a webhook, so you can call into any external system through an API call. It can be a Salesforce platform event. For those of you who know CRM, then you can consume that in flow and really start to orchestrate very powerful processes. And so you can even use an data action target as a platform event to even external CRM org. So it doesn't have to be in the same org. And then last but not the least is you can also create a data action for either sending them an email or doing a journey entry action, So those are some other ways. So here's sort of high level in terms of what are those differences, right? So your activation, your typical user is a marketer. Your data action, the typical user is either a data aware specialist or a data engineer. And the usage is like activation is more of publishing a segment to an activation platform. Data action is a process that sends more of real-time events or alerts events to targets such as your Salesforce core or your, based on webhook data. Um, Data actions primary focus is being able to activate a segment with relevant profile attributes and other personalization, and other metrics, whereas data actions sort of primary focus is on more real-time events and insights at a channel, product, or sort of level, where as data, fast-moving data is coming in, like you want to, trigger actions. Um, um, the timing is for segment activation. You basically schedule activation of, typically it's like large segments with hundred thousands or millions of profiles, whereas for data action, it's more micro batches of records, or sometimes it can just be one record based on a change event happening. And then, last but not with your activation targets, it's all of the activation targets that we have talked about, from Salesforce Marketing Cloud, Commerce Cloud, Google Cloud Storage, S3, SFTP, external platform. Whereas with data action is basically a webhook, Salesforce platform event, or into Salesforce Marketing Cloud. And I think this session next Tuesday, we'll be going into a lot more depth into data actions as well. All right, let's talk about, from an interest, from a study tip or from a certification tip, right? So act on data itself. The section is about 18%, of your exam. And here's what the uh, definition is, right? So you need to be able to define activation and their basic use cases. How do you use attributes as well as related attributes? Also identify and analyze the timing dependencies, as well as how do I troubleshoot common problems with activation, including accepted rigid records, and then how do you use data action? So, what I have seen or what we have seen is like this section is uh, even though it seems straightforward, but from an exam wise, where people have struggled a bit more with than we thought, right? So I think as you are trying to study and review in the documentation, like make sure you understand the different activation targets that we have. Make sure you understand how activations get used as well as what they're used for. Make sure you know how activations relate to and are linked by segments. um, Also, understand how activations gather and use attributes, both related and direct attributes, as well as understand the dependencies here and the order of operations, right? As well as what some of the common troubleshooting techniques are, as well as knowing how data actions work, their relationship with either streaming insight, their relationship with change data capture, and what are some basic use cases. And the last, I would say also pay attention to how calculated insights can be used in um, its activations. I think, that is what I would say sort of focus on from an exam perspective, right, as you're studying for it. I think one of my slides got hidden, so I will share that right now before I hold on. Okay, never mind. I think we are good. I think that's it. Yeah, I mean, at this point, I'm happy to take any questions that we have.
Thanks, Arvind. I really like the slides. They're like easy to understand, especially the ones that with the graphics and all the visual elements in there. So
Sure.
they say, right, a picture is worth more than a million words. So really like the content. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. I'm looking at the
Yeah.
question. Um, I'm reading a question by Heather. When using MC Connect and using CRM to generate unique subscriber key, is it required that we need to do some querying to build a new deal after sending segments to Marketing Cloud in a way that we are
Uh,
using the correct subscriber key?
yeah. So again, it's based on how your data is unified. So what you will get in Marketing Cloud itself is uh, is a shared data extension of the individual ID that you have in Data Cloud would be the subscriber key. So I don't think you technically need to build a new query, right? But then you might have a case where if you're trying to do some more data manipulation, you might.
Okay. And whenever we're doing the activation, if we want to push the data from the data cloud to the specific data extension, how can we do that?
Well, you cannot do that. It basically creates a new data extension. So how about this? So if for any new segment activation, it creates a new data extension within Marketing Cloud. When you refresh that segment, it will basically update that data extension.
That answers, Arvind. It's about the platform event and webhook activation targets. Only two or demo org has limited to do these two targets. I mean, like only these two are available. I think there are more available, but only in the demo org these two are available. Is that right?
I'm trying to see which
It's
only two.
the very
Okay.
beginning. Like,
Yeah, well, platform event and webhook. Well, I think the marketing cloud will only show up if you are installing the connector to it, you know. But yeah, so I think there's platform event, there is webhook, and then there is marketing cloud for either email or journey action. And I, you know what, I had accidentally, I think, hit that slide. Let me cover. This is one. I just let me quickly cover so that I. Uh, all right, so I was like, why is yeah? So hopefully you guys can see my slide.
yeah.
Yes. Okay. So this is just about um, troubleshooting activation error. That's also going to be a key part of your test as well. So I guess when do the activations error out, right? So sometimes it's like if your required fields they don't have a value. If like Data Cloud does not enforce like in terms of valid email address from a contact when unless you're doing some data cleansing, but when you activate and you say this is my contact point and email address, that might error out if there is an invalid date. For SMS subscribers, if you don't have the right locale or invalid locale. And then if you have changed for marketing cloud for engagement itself, if you modify those fields within your shared data extension. So those are some of the, so like I would say you will get the slide deck afterwards that has a link to our help doc. So definitely review that as well in terms of what are some of those common, errors that you can have.
Thanks, Arvind. And how about if you wanna push the data from the data cloud into the SFMC FTP location?
Um, how about can you push the data? So SFTP is a valid, is an activation target that can be created for ingestion as well as activation. But the recommendation is not to use the data cloud, not to use the SFTP that you get as part of marketing cloud for data cloud SFTP stuff.
Okay. And I hope that helps. So Surendra, if you have anything else, please put that in the chat. And anybody else has any questions, please post them in the chat. And we will
Yeah.
have the slide deck and the recording available on the YouTube. And make sure you look at the description section to see the slide deck link as well. So we have one more session, that is the data actions on the day 11. And then we have Arvind coming again for the Ask Me Anything panel. And we'll have Matthew and Vlad as well joining. Make sure you register for those sessions. And also please fill out the form with your questions prior to the session.
I'm just trying to see the chat window, see if there's any other questions that have come.
Yeah. And I see a lot of great feedback for the session, Arvind. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I hope everyone's learning is going well. And yeah, feel free, reach out. Like it's not complex, but just understanding the entire life
Yeah.
cycle. And I know, this, and I think again, a few key takeaways is there are different ways to get value from your data and data cloud, and activation is just one of them. There are, lots of other ways that I had highlighted, and especially, I mean, as you are using data cloud or as you're implementing data cloud, those are things you need to keep in mind.
Thanks, Arvind. And also, I would like to thank you and Matt and Vlad, especially for creating all the great content, and also not just that, but you have been actively collaborating on this bootcamp and contributing a lot for this one. And as you are aware, for the people outside the partner community, the resources are limited, and what you're doing now is very impactful. And we all thank you.
Yeah. No, and thank you as well for creating this initiative to just upskill our broader ecosystem, our broader Trailblazer community. Yeah. One thing I forgot to mention is in Trailhead, we just launched, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, our first hands-on, so which is now uh, available for all our Trailblazers, right? So you can actually get a trial org, I think, for 5 days, I think it is,
Mhm.
and it lets you create and map a data stream. So I would say that's a quick way that you can actually get your hands in a data cloud org to actually start playing with it as well.
Right. Yeah, that's a good opportunity. Earlier, we were trying out ways how to get the hands-on work, but then we got this, and I think it has less limitations than the other trails that we were able to find. And thank you. And we hope
Yeah.
that there will be more trailhead modules with these hands-on activities.
Yeah, I mean, I know like they want to build more, and I think that's the plan, I think, so,
Mhm.
but yeah.
Okay. Thanks much. And thanks everyone. So well, I'll be sharing the recording and the slides soon. And hope to see you again in the next session, same time, Tuesday, 9 p.m., and the last session, Thursday, 9 p.m.
All
And
right.
we will be announcing the winners for the swag. We have 3 certification vouchers, and for US residents, 1 swag item. So we will be choosing the winners on the last 12th session. Make sure to join. Thank you once again. Have a good one. Take care. Bye.
All right. Thank you. Bye.